Hello everybody. We are starting. I'm not sure why there are no more people. I think eventually they will join. Let me just invite again. Okay, what we will be doing today is chassis. So I'm just trying to do a chassis here. So how does the chassis look like? I'm going to just show you. I hope all of you can see this. This is the chassis that we're going to design. End of the day, we mount the chassis on and the robot parts on the chassis, and this is how it looks. So the same chassis, the base body is what we're going to design, and we're going to start with design in such a way that we measure what each of these parts are, and then we're going to design it in Fusion. I hope all of you have a chassis with you and a scale. You can always get back and check how to do this. So I'm going to quickly do it. This today's session is just going to be half an hour, 4 to 4:30. So we're going to finish this today, and then I will also tell you how to send a file so that we can cut or print out a chassis for you or manufacture a chassis for you. So that's also the idea of this particular session, how we will be able to design and also manufacture. So the next session in between, I'm going to also tell you, show you a video of how a chassis is getting manufactured. Today we'll learn how we build this or sketch this, and then how we send it across for what do we call as laser cutting or 3D printing. Either one of them can be followed. So this is the chassis that we're going to do. I'm going to quickly shift to my other screen. What is it? Okay, I'm going to show you my Fusion screen. Yes, share. Okay, I'm just trying to give you one Fusion and perfect. So this is the one. Okay, cool. Now I hope you are all able to see the Fusion screen. I'm gonna start drawing. This is my new file that I've created. How do I do that? Don't save. So this is a new file when I open Fusion. A couple of you have already attended the previous sessions, so you've seen how this was being done. Are you all able to see the Fusion screen?
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. Can you also see? Just hold on. Let me just give you another view. What do you guys see? You guys see my picture and the Fusion screen?
Yes, sir.
Okay, great, awesome. So this is what we will be doing. I'm going to show the chassis here in this small inlay picture that you see in the corner, and I'm also going to draw it. Let me just see if I can increase the size so that it's helpful for you to see it a little bigger. Okay, cool. All right, cool. Um, Back to cool. All right. So this is the chassis, and let me just perfect. So you're all able to see the chassis. I have a very special equipment with me today. This equipment, it's called a vernier scale. VERNIER. It's also a digital caliper. Caliper means to measure. So this is a digital measurement. So I can measure these things with very good accuracy. So the resolution that I get is 0.1 mm. So I can measure it in 0.1 mm. So what happens here is I move this. So if I have to measure, for example, the thickness of this screwdriver here, I see it as about 1 point, hold on, let me just check what this is. Yeah, it says 2.1. So it is 2.1 mm. The screwdriver, the shaft thickness is 2.1 mm. So it's easy, I don't have to use a scale which can only measure about 1 mm. This device can measure 0.1 mm, which is 1/10 of a millimeter. Okay, great. Also, we will be designing this chassis on our sketch. So let's start with the sketch. This is your Fusion environment. I'm gonna first save. I'm gonna save it. I press the save button or I press Control S, which gives me. I say chassis. Just Robotics chassis. This is universal chassis. The chassis that we've always used in all the robots. So you can design your own chassis, different measurements, and I press save. So now you see that the file is got saved. I'll again quickly go to my document settings and check if the units are mm, which is millimeter. Yes, it is. I say okay. Now I'm good to go. We're going to start with sketch, create sketch. I select the bottom plane, select the plane, and go to the top view, and we are ready to. Now we know this chassis is first of all rectangular. It is a rectangle before I do a curve like this. So I first take the measurements. So using my vernier, I take a measurement of the width of the chassis. I get a reading. I take a width of the chassis. I get a reading which says 110 mm. Okay, the width of the chassis. The width is 110 mm. So let me do a rectangle. Create rectangle, a center rectangle, and this says this is 110. The width is 110. Now the length is something that I have to check. So I'm going to go back and check the length. It says about 155 mm. Okay, so this is 155 mm, which is actually 15.5 centimeters. The height of the chassis is 15.5 centimeters. So going ahead and making this 15.5. So 115. Sorry, 155. 155. Sorry, this is supposed to be 110. This is supposed to be 155. Clear? So this is my chassis. Okay, people, I might have to mute all of you primarily because we are getting some disturbances. Thank you. Okay, right. So from here, I've got my outline of the chassis. This is the outline of the chassis. The next thing that I can do is do this curve and then go on further. But I'll also share a couple of tips that you need to follow here. What you see here in the center as dotted lines is actually a construction line. We learned about it last class. If I draw a line and then click on that line and press X, it becomes a construction line. Now also here on the right side there is sketch palette. I'm just bringing it here to the forefront. There's a sketch palette, and that sketch palette is actually telling me what construction is like. So when I click on this, it becomes a line. It's no more a construction, it's a straight line. So all those lines that are not part of the drawing are dotted lines. This is what you learn in geometry also. When you draw dotted lines, it is only for reference, it is not part of the drawing. So these two lines by default come in as construction lines. Now also you look at these symbols here, this one, these are all called constraints. This line is equal to this line. That's the reason why you have this option. Also this equality sign, you see this equal. So those are constraints. Now I defined a rectangle, which means my opposite sides are equal. Okay, cool. So coming back to drawing. Now I want to draw a couple of other lines also, which will be helpful for me in future. So I go to create and click on line. I select the midpoint here. Now notice how well whenever I move my mouse very close to the midpoint, it automatically pulls itself towards the midpoint. And you see that small triangle? You see the small triangle here? When I move closer, you see the small triangle that comes? That is because it says that that's the midpoint. I want to draw a line from here to the other side and make that line a construction line. Okay, so that I have some references, and also do another line here. You can press L, click on this, and even this line has to be made a construction line. Click on it and press X. I made a couple of construction lines, so it's easy for me to put points around. So if I have these points that I'm supposed to be drawing, I can put it easily. The next thing I do is the curve. Okay, for the curve. Now one easy way of doing it is I measure what is the distance from here to here. Then I know the distance between this point to this point. This distance. I want this distance. Suppose I draw a straight line from here to here. Suppose I draw a straight line from here to here. I need to know this distance. Okay. So what I do is I first measure this. Let me use a vernier and measure this distance. It's not a very accurate way of measuring because there is no edge. The edge is curved. So when I measure, it tells it is about 135. Yes, it's about 135 mm. Okay, so 135 mm. So I have to draw a line here which is about 135. I can do one more thing. Let me create a point. I want to create a point on this line here. Okay, I just place a point, and then we learned last class about dimensions. I want to define a constraint telling this point has to be equal at particular distance from this line. Okay, so I click on D, or I go to create and say where is dimension? Yeah, here I have constraint where I say where is the dimension? So I press D and then click on this point and click on this line, and this distance what you see has to be how much? It has to be 135 divided by 2. 135 divided by 2. Why? Because it's exactly halfway from the center. So I got a point. I want to create a similar point here. I can do it in two ways. I can put a point and then create a constraint, or I have another option called mirror. This option called mirror is present here in create. Go to create, option called mirror, click on that point. Where do you want to mirror? You want to mirror across this line. This is the center line. So select the object. I selected the object, which is this, and then I select the mirror line. This is the mirror line, and I say OK. Did you see there's a point that's come here? There's a point that's come here. Also, now I want to mirror this line, this 2 points along on these two sides, or I can do another thing where I just click on this point and create mirror. Let me select both these points, this point also, and say create mirror of this point, and where did the point go? Mirror this point and this point, sorry, create mirror this point and this point along this line. I get two other points there. Okay, great. Now I have to draw a curve for this part. I have to do a curve, and I know this curve is from this point to this point, and it's touching it here in the center. So what I do is I go to create and see if there is a curve. There is no curve, but there's something called arc, and in arc there is a 3-point arc. I have 3 points. I have this point, and the center point. So I use a 3-point arc, select this point, select this point, and select this point. Now I'm done with my arc. I can do the same thing here, but I can also do another thing of mirroring this line itself on the other side. So that's easier primarily because suppose I want to make changes here. Look at this there's a very interesting thing. Suppose I want to make changes. I say this is not 135 but it is 140 by 2. You see how the dots moved from on all the sides? Because I had only put constraint on one point, but it moved on all the sides. That's the advantage of using the mirror function. When you make changes in one place, it makes changes in all the other mirrored objects. Okay, I'm going back, and then I mirror this line. So go to create, mirror, I've selected this line. The mirror line is this, and say this is come, I say okay. Now you see I've got this. Now I'll just fast forward a little and show you how the chassis would look like. So if I have to make a 3D model of this, how would I make it? So this is a sketch that I've created. I clicked on the home button here, and this is a sketch that I've created. If I have to make a 3D model, I press on extrude, click on the surface that you want to extrude. I could select everything, but I'm not selecting because it's not any use to me. So I extrude it this much, but for this I need to know the thickness of the chassis. So let us measure the thickness of this chassis. I'm just going, so it says 4.6 mm. I'm not sure if you're able to see it, but it says 4.6 mm. So 4.6, and okay, look at this. This is our chassis without the holes in the center. I'm just turning it around using the center scroll button of the mouse and the shift key. I've got my chassis ready. Let's go back. Okay, this is not what I want. I want to make sketch the holes and all of that that's required for the chassis. So I'll go back to my sketch, right click and say edit sketch. Now I'm just going back to the sketch that I was doing, and I'll now make all the edits that are necessary. Okay, cool. Cool. So what is another important thing that we'll have to look at? Look at this one here, this one, this, and this. All these 4 holes that you see, 1, 2, 3 and 4, actually for the clamps, and I have a very specific thickness of a clamp that I'm using, which means this distance, this width that is there is equal to the thickness of the chassis, because I am making the clamp also with the same material. I'm making the clamp also with the same material. So I use the width to be 4.6 and do these 4 points. I have to take a measurement. I'm going to take measurements now. I first measure what distance it is from all the other ends. I get about 18, and then from the center it is Okay, cool. I also measure the height of this. So how do I measure? I have this part for measuring the height or internal distance. So see how I measure. I do this and it says it's 16. It says 16. I think my camera is flipped, inverted. It says 16. This is 16 mm. This height is 16 mm and the width is 4.6. And I also have to measure how far is it from the edge. So let me measure how far is it from the edge. It says it is about 18 mm from the edge. And how far is it from the top? Now for me, I don't have a proper reference because this is curved. I don't have a proper reference as to where exactly it is, so I'll just keep it open for now and then we'll figure out how we do it. Okay, so I have to do a rectangle, so I create a rectangle and I have to do a 2-point rectangle. 2-point rectangle. I want to create a rectangle somewhere here, and that rectangle is supposed to be, this is supposed to be 4.6, that is the thickness. Wait, that is not, that is supposed to be 16, and this is supposed to be 4.6. Okay, look at this. This is what we have created, and I want 4 of these on all the sides. Okay, but first I have to constrain it. That's the reason why it's blue in color, because it doesn't know where it has to go. I can move it anywhere that I want. Okay, first I have to constrain. So let me create a constraint. How do I create a constraint? Press D, D for dimension, D, and say the distance between this point and this point is always supposed to be how much? 18. Is that what we measured? Yeah, it's 18.5. 18.5 mm. Done. Now you can see that you could move this, you could move this in this direction, but you cannot move it in any other direction. Oh God, what happened? Okay, it's here. Now I want to also define this distance to this distance. So I'm going to make some construction line. So I'm going to quickly measure the distance between this point and this point. If I'm drawing a straight line from this point to this point, I'm going to quickly measure what's the distance from here to here. Let me just calculate that and let you know. It's about 23, 22. It's about 23 mm. So I say dimension again, click on this point and this point. This distance is always supposed to be 23. Done. Hold on, is it really 23? Yeah, it's 23. Okay, so I'm done with this part. I'm now gonna flip it on the other side. So how do I flip it? I use the mirror function, create mirror, click on this, not just one line but all the 4. So double click, it will select all the 4 points, 4 lines. I want to mirror along which line. I want to mirror it along this line and say okay. Now I got another one here. Now how do I mirror on the other side, bottom side? I select both. So go to create, click on mirror, I select this and select this. I could mirror it along this line. So select the line, this is the line, I now mirror it, I say okay. So let us just say that we finish the sketch, click on finish sketch, but I have not extruded it, right? I have not selected what all planes to extrude or what all surfaces to extrude. So I go back here, right click, edit feature, you have selected just that. I want to deselect this. I want to deselect this. So I deselect this, this and this, and I say okay. Now what you see is your chassis, right? So this is how we did the clamps, the slots for placing your motors. We have to now go on and do few other things, but in this design not all are important. For me most important is these two clamps holder, and another important thing is this hole for cast a ball. This hole is very important for me, so I'm going to do these two only and leave the rest for you to design. So let me go back to my sketch, double click or right click and edit sketch. I have to do two slots for cast a ball. That's going to come somewhere here. So how do I create a slot? If you see, it is a circular slot, it's not a rectangle, it's a circular slot. So I go to create. Do I have a slot? Yes, I have option for slot. I can have a center to center slot. Okay, I create a small slot here. Okay, cool. Now a very important thing about this slot that you see here, is that we need to know the dimension of this slot. So I'm going to just check the height of the slot. That's about 3 mm. Why 3 mm? Is because the bolt and nut we are going to use is a M3 bolt and nut. So that's the reason why this hole has to be at least 3 mm. The width, why have we given the width? We have given the width so that your cast ball could move a little left or right. We don't want it to be exact. In case the measurements go a little here and there, we still want your cast ball to fit into these holes. Okay, so let me just do it again. Okay, now in the sketch looks a little weird, so I'm going to just remove a few components here. Okay, so that's easy for me to see what all is available. Now I have to do a slot, create slot, I can say creates a linear slot width. Okay, what did I select? I selected a overall slot because I know the width and I know the height. So I'm going to create something here. The width of the slot is gonna be how much? It is about 6.6 mm. So I'm just gonna make it 6.6 mm. 6.6. And the height has to be about 3 mm. I'll give it as 3 mm. Sorry, 3.0 and press enter. Oh, okay. So this is the slot that I've created. See this? Okay. Now I want the slot to be how far from the center, because the caster ball is going to come in the center. This is the caster ball that we are talking about. This is coming in the center. So I want the slot to be equal distance from the center, the slot that I'm going to do again on this side. Okay guys, our meeting is going to end in a few minutes. In case it ends, you click on the same link and join again. We'll still be live. Okay, so I've created the slot. Now I want to tell how far it is from the center. For that I need to know this distance, the distance between these 2 points. So I'm going to take that measurement and it says it's about about 20 mm. It's going to be about 20 mm. So I'm going to select this line. So let me create a dimension D, this point to this point. Okay, no, there is no point there. How do I make it? Okay, let me select this edge. this point to this point is supposed to be how much? Let me just calculate again. The distance is about, so I'm just measuring this distance, the distance between the inner edges. So it's about 14 mm. So I'm going to make it 14 by 2. 14 by 2. You see this? It's 7. So from this edge to the center is 7, because I know that the distance between this slot and the slot that I'm going to create here is about 14 mm. So how do I create another slot? Is create mirror, click on this and select the mirror line. This is the mirror line, and say okay, I've got this, and I can finish my sketch. Why is my sketch not selected those holes? Is primarily because when I did extrude option, I did not select those 2 points. So in profile I deselect everything. Then I start selecting what I want. I select this and say okay. Got it? So this is my chassis. This is my basic chassis that I'm going to design with 2 holes for the caster ball, 2 slots for the clamp and all. Now I want to also make a clamp, so I'll create another clamp here quickly before our time just runs out. I go to this and say I create a new sketch. Click on top view. I want to create a, okay, let me hide this body. Why am I hiding this body? I don't want the clamp to be overlapped on the chassis. Click on body. Okay, I want to create the clamp here. Select this plane. How is my clamp going to look like? Give me a moment. I'm just going to bring a, this is the clamp. This is the clamp that we're going to use. So how do we do the clamp? It's a rectangle again. So I create rectangle. Okay, center rectangle. What is the dimension of the clamp? The height of the clamp is about 36 mm and the width of the clamp is about 32 mm. So it is 36 by 32. Enter. Okay, I've done the entire thing. I've not done just the part here. I've done the entire thing as a box. Now what I've done is I need to know the dimension of this. So select this. It's about 16 mm, because you remember the chassis slot width was 16 mm. So I need to create a T here which is 16 mm. Now also will create a few lines from this center to this center and call that a construction line by clicking on X. I'll create another line, press L or select line from here to here, and again select this and press X. Okay, great. I want to create another rectangle, a smaller rectangle. So I go to create rectangle. Let me just do a 2-point rectangle from this point to somewhere here. Okay, this dimension is not defined. Okay, I want to define that dimension. So I need to know the height of this. This height is about 29. Okay, so skip Control Z. I'm going to create again rectangle from this point. The height is 29. The width is 16. Enter. Another important thing is I want this to be equal distance between this and this. Okay, Now how do I do that? Let me try if I can do some constraints here. Perpendicular, collinear, symmetrical. Okay. Now I am clicking on this option called symmetry here. Click on symmetry, this and this along this. Is that clear? I made these two lines symmetrical along this line. I'll show it again. I clicked on symmetry and then selected this and clicked on this, so that it became symmetrical along that line. Now once this is done, you see that it's constrained. What I can do is I can delete this. Now let me draw with a line. I click a line from here, this point to this point. I create a line, and I click on line again. I want to create a line from here to here. Okay. Now very interesting. Look at what is being done. I am supposed to trim off all the extra parts. So this option called scissor here, which is trim, modify, trim. Click on this and trim out all the extra parts. This is an extra part, this is an extra part, this is an extra part, this is extra part, this is extra part, this is extra part, and this is an extra part. Now I've created the T shape that I required. I also have to now create the slots for the motor holes. So I'll also create a slot, the overall slot. I want the slot to be like this. If you remember, what was the dimension that we used? We used it as 6 mm, and then this width was 3 mm. Okay, enter. Now I've created the slot. Also want to create one more slot here down. I will do it as a circle and not a slot. I want to do a circle, but that circle also has to be exactly in the center. So create this. What should be the diameter of the circle? The diameter of the circle has to be 3 mm because that's the bolt that I'm going to use. Okay, this is done. Now very important is the distance between this slot and the circle. I measure it here. From here it says about 11.5 mm. So I'm gonna say D. Click on D and then select this point and this points on the circle and say, I should say 11.5, but I'm supposed to do, I'll do it 13 because it selected the center of the circle and not the edge. So this distance is gonna be 13. Enter. Okay, cool. But still it is not constrained because let me show you. I can still move this up and down. See that? I don't want that to happen. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to define the distance between this and the bottom. So the distance between this and bottom is about 4 mm. So I'll also say dimension this and the bottom is supposed to be, oops, sorry, D, escape, this and bottom is supposed to be 4 mm.
Hello, sir.
Yes. Yeah. So this dimension I'm gonna say is supposed to be 4 mm. There is some problem here because this is tilted. This is because I've not done a proper constraint. But never mind, I'm just gonna leave it the way it is. I've done with this part. Now it's ready to extrude. I press E, option E, click on this and extrude it. What is the distance that I have to extrude it for? I'm supposed to extrude it for about 4.6. Guys, can you see my screen?
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. Supposed to use extrude it for about 4.6 mm and press enter, and I've got my clamp. Also, you have fancy designs around. There's a curve here, there's a curve here. Now how do you do this? You have two options. I can use an option called fillet and make the curves along this once the 3D model is ready, or I can do it in the sketch itself. Now let me show you how I do it in 3D model. Go to modify, your option called fillet, F, select the edges, this edge, and this edge and this edge. I want to create a fillet. Oh my god. Okay, this fillet radius has to be about 3 mm. Enter. Now interestingly, this is what my clamp will look like. Okay, this is my clamp. So you see there is body 1, body 2. This is one body, this is the clamp. So I'm going to rename it. Right click, rename. Where is rename? Is there a rename? Oh, let me double click. Oh, I can. So I'll call this the clamp. Oh yeah, let me call it a T clamp. A T clamp. And then this is gonna be my chassis. Okay, so basic chassis. Fine, cool. So I've got two parts, the T clamp and the chassis. Now you will not see the clamp because the clamp is in the center. I'm just gonna move the clamp. So if I have to move something, I click on not create, modify option. Here I have move a copy, click on clamp, select it. So just select this here. You can select it here on the left side and then just move it a little away. And you also know you need two clamps at least for making a robot. So I'm going to make two clamps. How do I make two clamps? I can either click on this, right click and say create a copy and paste. So I have two clamps. Let me just move it here, say okay. So I've got two clamps and a chassis. So in the top view, this is how it looks like. So this is how we do design a chassis. I could make it a little more interesting by creating fillets around the chassis. I don't want the sharp edges to be there. So I go to modify, click on fillet, create on fillet, create a fillet around this. So select this edge, select this edge. Where am I? Oops. Okay, this edge and this edge, and I just give a fillet of 1 mm radius. So it just looks a little not too sharp. I've got this, and this is the home view. This is my chassis, and this is ready. So this is my project. Save it. I save it as final, or I also say it is 4:55 p.m. This is my chassis that you have done. So this is what we have learned today to build a chassis. I am gonna end the session because 5 o'clock we have a meeting and we are supposed to head there very quickly. So let me know how you've gonna do these things. I'm gonna tell you an easy way of exporting this for now. You can right click on the chassis and say save as STL if you want a 3D print, or you can go to sketches and just right click on the sketch and say sorry, okay, I'm just gonna leave it there. right click on the model body and say save as STL. If you save as STL file, that's a file that is used for 3D printing. You can 3D print your chassis using this option. You can save it as STL. But otherwise what you can do is go to your block here. Where is my chassis that I did just now? You can share it with me. You can download the design. There is people option. You can click on this and select my email ID. My email ID is brijesh@justrobotics.in. Just click email ID and press invite. I will be invited to your project and I can check your file. So this is for today. Thank you so much for being part of it. We have also recorded the session. We're gonna put it on YouTube if you wanna look at it a little later, or maybe you're gonna refer it to your friends. We will do a little more advanced modeling as the days go, and then later on we will also do programming and things. But we will let's do fusion. Let's do a little nice modeling, a good amount of 3D models, and then we will move into the next stage of robotics. Thank you. Have any questions? Leave me a message. You can discuss in the group. We will be creating a new WhatsApp group for this, just for the Hangouts. So those of you who are going to continue, I'll send you the invite link, and you can be part of it. Okay. Thank you so much. I'm gonna. Thank you. Welcome. I'm gonna stop sharing, and I'm also gonna end this meeting. Bye, sir. Bye, bye. Bye, bye.